Hi guys, this is Dr. Suguna. In this video, I am going to explain about exception handling in Python. What are exceptions? Exceptions are nothing but the errors detected during the execution of your Python program. What they will do, they will interrupt the flow of the program and make it to halt. You need to understand how to handle the exceptions in an essential manner because a good programmer should know how to handle the exceptions. Why these exceptions are coming? Exceptions will occur because of some various reasons, including the wrong user input or the system errors. You have to handle them properly to make sure that your program will be robust and it will prevent any unexpected errors from causing them. You can consider exceptions as emergency rooms. Handling exceptions is similar to how the doctors handle the emergencies. They identify the critical issue and fix it first to stabilize the patient. In the same manner, in programming, you need to identify the exception and take the necessary action to handle it. We can also say exception as a first aid. Handling the exception in your program is like being prepared as a first aid kit. Knowledge in exception handling will help you to anticipate the errors that may occur in your code, and it will create a safety net to handle them and prevent the further damage to your program. There are types of errors and exceptions. We have abnormal or unexpected behavior of the program. We call it as an errors. Errors can be classified into two types, normal errors or exceptions. See, this normal errors are classified into two categories, syntax errors and logical errors. Syntax errors means the mistakes you commit in your programming language. And you have logical error means you don't write the proper logic in that case it will cause the wrong results. Runtime errors are called as exceptions. Here we have synchronous exception and asynchronous exception. Synchronous exception means you can control by the code, but asynchronous exception you cannot control by the code because it will be caused by some hardware malfunction or disk failure. So let us see how to handle the exception in Python. To handle the exception, it uses a block called try block, where in this block you will write the code to test for exceptions. And we have a block called except block. This except block will handle the exception and it will provide an appropriate response for this exception. You can have multiple except blocks to handle the different exceptions. So the syntax is you have to write a try colon. In this you have to write some statements and accept some statements. See, the statements which you write in the try is testing for the exception. If any exception has raised, then in the except block whatever the statements you have written will be executed. We'll see an example. So in this example we have written a print statement just signaling that before exception, and you have written a try block. In this you have written a statement print x, and in the except block you have written print exception raised. Now you can see that this statement print x it is an exception. Why it is an exception means this x is not defined, so definitely it doesn't know what to print for the x value. So this is an exception. So this exception will cause the statement which is defined in the except block to be executed. And after this, we have written a statement after handling the exception. So now the output will be, you have written a print statement, so before exception, and this is an exception. So it will cause this statement to be printed. So exception raised will be printed, and after handling the exception, statement will be executed. Now, exception handling will have different blocks apart from try and except. So the try block, as you know, it will have a code which may raise an error. This except block will handle the error which is raised in the try block. If there is no exception, then this except block, the statements in the except block will be skipped. Apart from these two, you have a block called else block. See, this block will be executed if there are no errors raised in the try block. See, this will something like it will signal that in the try block, the statements doesn't have, it didn't initiate any exception. Then finally block are the statements which is used to process regardless of the whether it is raised or not the exception, this statements will execute. And you have a raise keyword which is used in the try block to throw a user defined exception. Now this else block is something like the statements, whatever you write in the else block, these statements will be executed when there is no exception. So this is useful for cleanup task and it is not for error handling. And this finally block is used to execute a block of code. After this try except blocks, see this is the purpose is it will work like a gears. So in the clock, these gears don't determine what the clock does, but they will make sure that all the parts are working correctly. And it is also, it can be considered as a life jacket for your code. So this will ensure that the code is exiting properly. And it can be used for cleanup duty, like we can just free up the resources used. So example using all these blocks is, see here we have, we received an input and it is stored in A. Whatever you receive, it is converted into an integer and it is stored in A. And similarly, you receive B. Then we have written, we need to perform the summation of these two values. I have introduced a try block. So this is a test statement. Test statement is checking whether A is divisible by B. Okay. And in the except block, if this A is not divisible by B, in case if you give B as 0, then it will raise an exception that this is not divisible. So in that case, this statement, try block erased exception will be executed. If no exception is there, then this else block will be executed where it is printing the quotient. And this finally will be executed after this try except block is completed. And after this, we have written a statement like finding the result is equal to A power B. Now let us see what will be the output. So if I give for in my first case, I have given A as 10 and B as 5. And it is printing the sum equal to 15 and it is entering the try block. And 10 by 5, no problem at all. So there is no exception. So it will compute D is equal to 2. And this except block, there is no, this except block will not be executed and it will enter into the else block. So where it will print the quotient and this finally block will be executed and the last last statement will be executed. Now we'll see the second example. So I have given A as 10 and B as 0. So now this statement, no problem, it will execute. D is equal to A by B. So 10 by 0, it will raise an exception. So division by error, 0 error. So it will enter into the except block and it will print this statement. And since the exception has raised, this block will not be executed and it will come to the finally block and it will execute. So we can also see some specific exceptions that may arise in your program. One is attribute error. Attribute error means you are trying to use certain functions or the methods which is not allowed for that object. That is what is called as an attribute error. Say for example, you have s is equal to hello. Okay, in the try block, it is written as s is equal to hello. And now I am using a method s.append. This append is not available, is not associated with the string. Then it will cause the error which is called as the attribute error. Okay, so in the except block, you will be having attribute error. See, these are predefined errors. Similarly, the value error. See, this exception is raised when a function receives an argument which is an inappropriate value. Say, for example, you are trying to convert hello to integer. Int is a conversion function, typecast function. So it will be trying to convert this string to integer. This is not possible. So in that case, it will, in the except block, it will raise an error which is called as a value error. Then similarly, you have type error. Type error means it is raised when the operation or a function is applied to the object of inappropriate type. So we are trying to add 3 plus 5, where 3 is an integer but 5 is a string, which will cause the type error. And IO error is also raised when an input or output operation fails. So in the try block, we are trying to open a file. Okay, open a file. But if that file doesn't exist, then it will cause the IO error. So these are some specific exceptions available. Now, when you want to create your own exception in Python, then we can customize your error message and you can create a specific exception using a raise statement. So custom exception means creating one exception class in the Python to handle the unusual situations. It's called as the custom exceptions, and this is raised by using a statement called raise. So now we'll see an example how to create a user-defined exception using raise. So we need to raise an exception when the customer has a low balance in the bank account. So let us assume we have some bank accounts. We have 4 account holders and we have used a dictionary to just include the item containing the name and the amount they have deposited, and it is a dictionary, and I am fixing minimum balance is equal to 2000. In the try block, we need to assess each and every person and see whether they have a minimum balance. If they have minimum balance, then I have to raise the exception. So I have searching the each and every account by using account.items, where it will retrieve both the key and the value. Here the key is the name and value is the amount. So for name comma amount in the account dot items, if the amount is less than minimum balance, then I have to raise the exception. Okay, so I'm just calling the function exception and I am passing a parameter which is the name. Now, if any account holder is having the less than minimum balance, this except block will be executed, where it will print the name and it will tell that you have a low balance in your account. So irrespective of all these occurrence, this finally block will be executed, where I am printing simply the name and the amount of the account holders. Now let us see this example. So what happens is, the first item, that is Harry 10,000, doesn't satisfy this condition. The amount is not less than minimum balance, so it will skip. And when it comes to John, then his balance is less than 2,000, so it will raise an exception, where this will come to the except block and it is printing the name. So I am passing the name, right? So it will pass John here. So John, you have low balance in your account. That's it. And this finally block will be executed irrespective of any exception raised. So here I am printing simply the account holder name and the amount. Now we can also use multiple except class in the along with the try block. So at most one handler will be executed. When you have multiple exceptions, only one exceptions at a time will be executed. And it may have the name of the multiple exceptions in the parenthesized tuple also. Now we'll see an example for a multiple exception. Now here I am just reading an input and stored in Y, reading an input and storing it in Y. And now I am trying to convert this X value into an integer Y value and perform a division. Now, if, as I told you, if the denominator is 0, then it will cause the error as zero division error. And this except block will be executed. And value error means if you give inappropriate value for X and Y, then this value error will be executed. Okay. So now, in that case, I am printing divisor and divisor should be an integer format. So first example, I have input given as 10 and Y is 0, then definitely this error, this zero division error will occur, and so it will print cannot divide a number by 0. And we have given inappropriate input like 10.5 and 3.2, then it will just give a divisor and divisor should be an integer format. So this is an example for a single try block with multiple except class. Now we can also define or create a user defined exception using class. So if you are going to use a class, then you have to make that class as a subclass of your exception. See, here I have written a class B and I have written an exception. Exception is a parent class. Okay, it is a built-in exception class. And here I am just writing a statement pass, which means that there is nothing is to be executed. And I am creating two more classes, C and D. C is the child class of B and D is the child class of C, where I didn't write any statements. Now, in order to process this exception, I'm using a for loop and I am assigning the classes as a list, and I am writing in the try where I am creating an object of the class. Okay, so I have written CLS open bracket close bracket, and I am just raising whenever you create an exception, it will go and execute this particular statements. If there is no statements, then it will raise an exception. So except D means you have to print D, except C means, so we have defined multiple except class where the input is the class name. Now what happens is when this for loop is executed, first time B will be assigned to CLS and it is raising B. That is, I am creating an object for the B. It will go there and there is no statement executed. So what it will do is it will raise an exception. So raising an exception will be except B and it will try to print B. Next C. C also doesn't have any statement to execute, so it will raise an exception, print C, and D like that. So you will get an output as B, C, and D. So that is about your exception handling. So thank you for watching and subscribe to my channel to have more videos. Thank you.